Who remembers how to do the keyboard shortcut for Pixel Preview? Command V. That one actually works in about almost every single program on your computer. Command V. Command P is print. Yeah. Great.
Having difficulty with that white highlight.
Oh,
because
okay.
every time I do it, I think it's some setting I have. Select the full, and then minus.
Okay. Go ahead and undo that real quick. Let me do this. Let me make sure everyone's got the file open, so we can kind of maybe review that, because I think it's worth reviewing. Yeah, you want to. How we did that highlight, because I know some of you guys struggled with it on Tuesday.
Yeah, I gave one.
You did. Did you finally get it though? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll show you again, because I know I went around helping out a couple of you, and it's one of those techniques that it's really kind of straightforward when you wrap your head around it. It just seems, really high tech. So let's see here. How did we do this? How did we do this highlight? Well, it's basically just the process of minusing the front object from a back object, right? And you can do this with just about any two shapes that you draw using the drawing tools in Illustrator. So for this example, I'm going to create a rectangle that's filled green and does not have a stroke on it. And I'm just going to hold the Shift key down to draw a perfect square, right? And in order to do the minus front, you have to have two objects, right? One thing is affecting the other. And so I'm going to draw another rectangle on top. This time it's going to be filled with a different color green, maybe this one here, nice and dark. Oops. I'm going to deselect this one. Now I'm going to choose the dark green, and I'm going to start drawing another rectangle right on top of it. So I have two objects here, and I'm doing this to illustrate the process. The procedures for creating this little highlight are the same. But basically now we have two objects, one on top of each other. Both of them, of course, need to be selected. And once they are, then you can do or use the minus front option. And of course, by doing that, the one that was on top was completely eliminated, and all we were left with was the remnants of the one that was in the back. So that was kind of the abstracted method of what we did to get this little line there, right? Pretty much the same procedure. And so what we ended up doing up at the top, for that top highlight, was we simply created a shape that had a rounded rectangle, or a rounded corner, I'm sorry, and then created a duplicate of that, and then did a minus front from the other one that was on top.
The shape with the, I have the shape with the round.
Okay, so let's back up another step. Absolutely. And by the way, did anyone remember that keyboard shortcut for Pixel Preview?
Command Option Y.
Command Option Y. That's right. So you'll notice if I do this on screen, Command Option Y, instantly my vector artwork turns into pixels. And the reason I can see this pixel grid, can anyone, I think I mentioned this on Tuesday, do you know what it is that brings this pixel grid up? Do you remember why it shows up? I'm not really asking a good question here. I'll just tell you guys. I'm still half asleep, I think. It's been a long day. Whenever you're in pixel preview mode, which is what we're in right now, you can obviously see that. I didn't draw all those little squares. That's just Illustrator's previewing the artwork. Whenever you zoom in greater than 600%, whenever you zoom in greater than 600%, you're going to see this faint pixel grid appear when you're in pixel preview mode. And I'm going to go ahead and select one of these objects, the one that's back here. And notice it's very weird, this selection that showed up, right? Because I've got, I selected it and it's showing a corner here on my object, but yet we know from the previous preview that I had up that this is actually a rounded corner with a stroke on it. Well, I've applied an effect to this, right? I'm kind of doing a review here because you guys, we've all done this already. There's an effect applied to this shape that has a rounded corner to it. So if I move this shape around when I'm zoomed in at this level using my arrow keys, you'll notice that my shape continues to snap to that pixel grid, right? You see that? It's jumping exactly 1 pixel. This is a very important thing, by the way. It's jumping exactly 1 pixel as I'm moving this object around. Now, if I go back to a standard preview mode where I'm here, and I'm going to double check to make sure I don't have an even keyboard increment set up. If I'm in my standard preview mode and I hit the...
Back there.
What's that?
How do you get back to the standard preview?
Anyone know the keyboard shortcut for standard preview mode? Command Y. Exactly.
Why?
Command Y.
Oh, I lost my colors.
So, what happens is if you're in pixel preview mode and you hit Command Y to go back to preview mode, the first thing it does is it takes you into outline, and then you hit Command Y again, and it gets you back into the standard preview. Okay, it's one of those tricky things about that. But anyway, I'm getting to your inquiry, Craig. I'm just kind of trying to review some other stuff that's important to remember about working and designing for web graphics and digital media. I have my keyboard increment setting in the preferences right now set at half a pixel. So it's going to move, anything I move on screen is going to move at half a pixel distance. And you'll see that because I still have that rectangle selected. And when I move this down, you'll see that now that black line back there only has a half a pixel on the top, but it's still a full pixel wide on the bottom, right? Because I moved it half a pixel down, so it's moved like so. Okay, I'll undo that, and I'll switch over to pixel preview mode. I'll do the same exact thing. Remember, I haven't changed my keyboard increment number in the preferences. It's still set at half a point. But when I hit the arrow key this time, it doesn't move half a point. It moves a full point. So that's something that Illustrator is doing for you as a courtesy when you're in pixel preview mode. It assumes that even if you have some arbitrary number set up as a I don't know what that is. I guess these things are set up to back up to Time Machine, but even though I have half a pixel set up in my keyboard increment, when you're in pixel preview mode, it's still going to move your object a full pixel. Does that make sense? Okay. It's kind of a recap of what we talked about on Tuesday, but it's an important one because as you start to build pixel graphics, because our next project is going to be web-based, you'll want to make sure that your objects are aligned to a pixel, right? And the reason for aligning your objects to a pixel, does anyone remember why we want to always make sure our objects are aligned to pixels? And we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. What's that?
Just a cleaner line.
Cleaner line, crisp. It keeps everything looking crisp when it's at 100% size, right? You get crisp, sharp-looking graphics. Because, and I'm going to demonstrate one more thing here, so bear with me. I'm going to undo that move. I'm going to go back to preview mode and move this half a pixel now. Okay? So it's not aligned to the pixel grid anymore. If I switch over to Pixel Preview, now look at this, what used to be this black line is now gray, right? Because Illustrator is trying to take that half a pixel and render it to a full pixel. And it doesn't know what to do, right? It's not perfectly aligned. You can see this line is slicing right down the middle of a pixel. Well, in the world of computer screens and monitors, is there such thing as half a pixel? No. And not on a device. A pixel is the smallest thing that can be displayed on your computer or device screen, is 1 pixel. It can't be split. You can have more pixels, you can have a higher, we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, you can have a higher resolution screen where there's more pixels in a single space, but you can't split a pixel in half. So Illustrator kind of can, and you can even do it in Photoshop actually. With vector objects in Photoshop, you can split a pixel in half in the graphics, but if it's trying to preview it, Illustrator doesn't know what to do with the half pixel, so it's kind of making this gray line up at the top and not really rendering as sharp as possible. So if I move this back up, it snaps right to that pixel, and you'll see a nice solid black line here and a solid black line there. Does all that kind of make sense as a recap of what we want to? Any questions on that? Okay, and we're going to get to that, Craig, I promise, but I have one more thing to cover as a review before we jump into the demo here. I sort of lied to you guys on Tuesday with some numbers that I threw out. You remember we were talking about the difference in size between a pixel and a point, right? Well, I went back and after class and I was like, wait a minute. That, I realized that, and I think it was you, Robin, that asked the question, how big is a pica, right? Well, a pica is 12 points, okay? And I'm switching from pixels over to points because we have points in Illustrator. And a point is exactly 1/72th, sorry, 1/72nd. I love that I record this stuff because if I ever go back and watch these videos, I don't know if you guys have, and you're probably sitting there cracking up going, oh my God, this guy's a joke. But a point is 1/72nd of an inch. Of an inch, right? That is a physical unit of measure. In other words, a point has a finite measurement, and it is 1/72nd of an inch. Okay? In the older world of computer device screens that we talked about, who remembers, and these computers are included in this because they're a few years old, who remembers how many pixels are in an inch on a computer screen like this? 72, right? So in this case, a pixel is exactly the same size as a point because there are 72 pixels. I'll just abbreviate that in an inch, right? So that's the same thing, 1/72. So that size is exactly the same. But as we talked about on Tuesday, there are devices that have more than 72 pixels in an inch now. Well, many devices, all sorts of tablets, all sorts of phones now, high resolution televisions, 1080p, high resolution displays that have more than 72 pixels in an inch. So a point is a finite unit of measurement, right? It's finite. It's always 1/72nd of an inch. Always going to be that. It's just like just like a millimeter is always a millimeter. It doesn't have any other size to it. However, a pixel can change size because it is not a unit of measure. It's a number of something in an inch. You see, so there could be a device like I think the Amazon Kindle HD has 212 pixels per inch, right? So obviously, the size of this pixel and the size of this pixel are not the same. This one is a lot smaller because in 1 inch, you can fit a lot more of them. Does that make sense? The differences there?
Well, how do you know what computer, what device has how many pixels?
You know what? You have to Google it, really, these days. I have to do that all the time because every device is different. You know, the iPad Mini with Retina is different from the iPad Air with the Retina display now. They actually have a different number of pixels. Even though they're both called Retina, you might assume that's the same number of pixels per inch, but that's not the case. So, and you know, Amazon, Kindle, Samsung, all the devices have different pixel dimensions per inch now. So it's making Illustrator type design more important, right? Because, you know, you want your graphics to be able to scale to any size. If you have an old computer, you want your graphics to look crisp on that. If you have a mobile device, high resolution screen, and it scales way down, but everything's real tight, it still needs to look crisp and sharp. So your graphics need to be able to scale to all sorts of different sizes, and that's why vector is so nice. You need to scale them up and down, and it won't reduce the quality of the image. So anyway, I wanted to correct myself on that because I mentioned that the pixel and the point were slightly different size, and that was the truth, but from a certain point of view, it was if you had a different pixel per inch ratio. Anyway, so hopefully that clarified that issue a little bit. Any questions on that? That kind of makes sense? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and recreate this highlighted edge here, just to kind of bring everybody back up to speed where we left off. So I'm going to hide this for a moment so I can recreate it. I'm going to hide this white highlight here. As a matter of fact, I can just delete it because I can recreate that really quick. Okay, so the way I did this is the first thing is I already have this object here, right, selected. And by the way, Tom, did you have access to the file? Do you have, because you weren't here on Tuesday. Oh, you're drawing it? Okay, all right. So anyone else not here on, everyone else was here on Tuesday, right? Okay, so what we did here is we have a rectangle, just a standard Illustrator shape, that's a rectangle, with a rounded corner effect applied to it. And the stroke is on the outside. That's the key thing. The stroke is on the outside. It's important to have that so that we preserve a full 1 pixel stroke there. I'm zoomed in real tight, but it is only 1 pixel. So I can use this same exact shape to create that highlight. So the first thing I want to do is copy and paste in front. Command C, Command F with that object selected. Okay. Now, on screen, it doesn't look like anything's changed, but I know it did because if I move this around a couple of times, I can indeed see that I have 2 of the exact same objects stacked on top of each other. I'll move it right back into position. Okay? The next thing I want to do is get rid of that stroke because the highlight is inside of that line. So I'm going to get rid of that stroke that's applied, and right now it's 1 pixel. I can come over here to my tools panel and simply get rid of the color on that stroke. And now I have just the outlined or the filled rectangle here. Okay. The next thing we need to do is convert this to an expanded shape. We won't be able to get those results of this rounded corner here if we keep these as shapes with effects applied to them. I'm going to change the color of this just so you can see that it's different from the shape in the back. See, I've moved it down just a bit, and it's indeed a separate shape. But the first thing I want to do is expand this so that so that we get this rounded corner as a shape. And so I'm going to come up here to the object drop-down menu and click on Expand Appearance. And then by doing that, I have now changed the, eliminated the effect that was applied, and this is now a rounded, physically rounded corner. You can see the blue line indicating that there. And I can move this around. Actually, moving it around won't prove it. The best way to prove it is to actually jump into outline mode. And you can see I've moved into, I've switched over into outline mode by hitting Command Y, and you can indeed see that that is a physically rounded corner. Okay? So now we have the copy. We need another copy because now we're going to do the Pathfinder on it. So I'm going to do another Command and paste in front, and I am going to switch over to pixel preview mode so that when I move this object, it moves exactly 1 pixel. And now I'll hit the down arrow 1 time, and I have a second copy of that shape. And you can see, indeed, I do, because there's the green one back here, the one I just colored yellow on top. And so now I can select both of these objects and do a pathfinder to eliminate the one that's in front. And minus front is what I want to use. So I'll do that, and indeed now we're just left with that little tiny sliver of 1 stroke or 1 pixel high shape that we can use as the highlight for this button. I'll change that to white, and voila, there we are. I'll move over or switch back over to preview mode, and you can see there's that highlight. Okay, is that a good recap? Everyone kind of get that? All right. So I'm going to go to 100% view, and we'll start on the next phase of this project, and that is, let me go ahead and open the original, and that is adding some additional effects or styles, really, attributes, I'm sorry, to this button to give it even more depth and dimension. So I'm going to zoom in here, and you'll see that a couple of things are going on. Number one, and I'm going to switch over to preview mode here. You'll see that this button actually has a texture in it, a little pixelated texture. In addition to that, it's got this sort of a white line going across it. It's actually a gradient, you'll see. And it's got a hard edge, and what this hard edge makes it look like it's got a highlight to it, right? Like the light's coming in from the top and sort of highlighting the upper half of the button. It's just called the glossy effect is what it is. And then when you zoom out at 100%, you can see that that button indeed has a real dimensional quality going on because of the gradient and that subtle highlight. So the way to do that is, and we'll switch back over to our other project here, which is this one here. And the way to do that is to apply additional styles to this object, attributes, excuse me. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the appearance panel by opening that appearance panel, and you'll see we now have a fill that we originally did, right? This yellow transitional kind of color of yellow here. That's what that fill is. We have our 1 pixel stroke on the outside. We already know that, and then of course the effect has been applied to it, which is the rounded corner. That's what's giving it the rounded corner effect. But we're going to add another style to this, another fill, I'm sorry, to this object. And we're going to do that by using the Add New Fill button here in the Appearance panel. Now this is a lot of review because we've certainly done quite a bit of this. But I can go ahead and add a new fill, and it's going to add it above the stroke, and it's going to duplicate the fill that's already been applied. So that the default when you add a new fill is it's going to take on the characteristics of the previous fill that you have in the appearance panel. So now we have 2 fills on this same object, right? And we're going to use this second fill to create that little highlighted effect that we had in the original design. Okay, in order to do that, we're going to get fancy with the gradients here. So with this fill layer, this fill attribute selected, this is the one we want to start with, I'm going to open up the gradient panel, and you'll see indeed it's the same exact fill as we had previous. I'm going to change the color of this gradient to white to start with. So I'm going to double click on this gradient slider here, and I'm going to change this to white. And I can do that quickly. You notice down here, if you look here on screen, you'll see Illustrator has conveniently given me the black and white swatches that I can drop onto this particular attribute here right from the color panel. If I switch over to the swatches panel, of course white and black are the first two colors that are available. And the reason for that is those are very popular, right? You use white and black all the time in design projects. So, boy, my computer is acting a little funky here. So I'm going to switch this first gradient to white. And there we go. It's starting to take effect. And I'm also going to switch the other gradient to white. So I double click on this slider, and I'm going to fill this side with white. And what's happened? What's happened to our shape? It doesn't look like much now. Doesn't it? See that?
It looks white.
It looks white. And why is that? Because it's filled with a white to white gradient. Okay? So this is what we're going to do next here. We're going to add another gradient slider in here, right in the middle, and you can do that by clicking in this area right here on the gradient slider graphic here. And you can tell that this is not exactly in the middle, right? I tried to get it in the middle, but can you guys tell that it's not exactly in the middle? How can you tell if it's right smack dab in the middle of
Location.
the location? I was off by 0.8%. Here, I dropped, when I placed this, it dropped it in the, it was close to center, but it wasn't quite centered. So there's a couple of ways you can get there. Number one, you can click on that drop-down menu by clicking on the down arrow and then selecting 50%, or this is a field you can type into. You can type in any number in there between 0 and 100. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to type in 50% and then hit enter, and indeed I've now got it exactly in the middle. All right, but it's still not right. Okay? And in order to get it right, let me ask this. Have any of you guys worked with this opacity on your gradient? Has anyone messed around with that yet? Did you even notice it was there?
Yeah.
You did? But just hadn't had an opportunity to use it yet? This is a really cool feature about the gradient tool in Illustrator. And that is, whichever of these sliders you have selected, and you can tell which one is selected right now, right? Can you physically tell which one is selected here on screen? It's got that little black arrow, right? So that's the one that's selected. Well, you can change the opacity of any of these slider controllers by clicking on the specific slider and then adjusting the opacity here. So I'm going to click on this first one. I think that's the one I want. And I'm going to change the opacity down to 0 here. And notice something is starting to reveal. And look what happens. It's kind of cool. Look what happens to this gradient here. It's actually showing me the transparency happening right on the gradient indicator there. And it's showing that with a little checkerboard kind of pattern. Is everyone else getting that? Getting that checkerboard in there? And you see what's starting to happen? Look. It's got 0 opacity, so that gradient is starting to show through. Yeah. So, and then one more cool thing that you guys probably haven't worked with is here on this gradient slider, you can actually move the position of where this transition starts. Okay, so right now this transition, the transition between white with zero opacity and white with 100% opacity, that transition is happening at the 50% mark, because I've clicked on this little indicator. But I can slide this around and move it towards the center here. And look what's happened now. I've moved the slider as far as it can go, which is at 87%. And now look what's happened to the gradient itself. It's actually the transition. It's all transparent, and it doesn't start happening until it gets around 80%. Any questions? Yeah, Carlos.
It's actually going sides.
Oh,
It
you
doesn't have that 90%.
yeah, you can change the direction. Watch this up here, Carlos. This right here is the angle of your gradient. And you can change that to 90, and modify the direction that your gradient is going. Okay? But for the most part, everyone should have something similar to what I have up here, right? Now, the way I achieved that, that subtlety of of that sort of glossy effect that goes across the button on the other one is I simply adjusted the opacity of this entire attribute, this fill attribute that we've applied here. So now if I go back to the appearance panel and roll open this new fill that we've created, and how do you roll open? Of course, you can see this. Oh boy, this stuff is not working well here. There we go. Oh, it's now highlighting the entire panel. Nevertheless, you can see my arrow here. This little arrow will show the other attributes for this this fill attribute that we've applied, and I'm going to change the opacity here and reduce that down to say 10%, 20%, so that it shows up a little bit. And now you can see that's how we kind of apply that glossy upper half effect to the button there. And then the next step is that texture. See how we're doing on time here? Yeah, got a little over an hour. I'll try and zip through this texture feature. So the texture, I can't remember exactly how I made it. It wasn't I just kind of designed that button in that project. But I think I used the pixel effect in the Photoshop effects. So you guys, we've worked with 3 different things. I know we've worked with, and maybe we've gone to some effects, but there are 3 things that you can apply to a single object, right, with the appearance panel. You can apply a new stroke, which we've done. You can apply a new fill, which we obviously just did. You can also apply a new effect as an attribute to an object in the appearance panel. And so I'm going to do that by clicking on the Add New Effect button, which opens up our effects. And I'm going to go down to these Photoshop effects, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Pixelate. No? Boy, I'd hate to cheat and have to go. Grain, there we go. I think it was Texture. And these are all, you can play around with these and get different effects, but I think I chose Texture and then Grain. Oops, Texture, then Grain. And it's going to open up our Photoshop effect. Okay? I'm going to switch from sprinkles to speckle and see what happens. I'll hit OK. And now we've got this new grain applied to the fill. But that's not exactly what I intended to do, actually. I realized I had this fill, that's why it showed up so small. I had this fill layer selected. I didn't notice that. I had the fill attribute selected, so it applied the grain just to this to this gradient that we did. Well, that gradient is so light and so subtle, I didn't mean to do that. Yes,
Is the gradient 20% opacity as well?
that's right. The gradient is 20% opacity. I changed it here in the appearance panel.
Gotcha.
Okay, and you can see that indicated here. So I'm going to undo that because I was on the wrong fill layer. I apologize for that.
Undo grain.
Mm-hmm. So this time I'm going to select the gradient fill layer. That's the one that I actually want to apply this grain tool. I want to show you what happens when you apply the effect. So now I'm going to click on Add New Effect there, go back down to Texture, Grain, and then I'm just going to hit OK with the settings that are in there now. Okay.
I don't really see much.
So at this stage, we really don't see much happening, right? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and we're still not seeing it. So obviously applying the grain to, I should have looked at my file as a cheat sheet, but obviously applying the grain to that fill is not really changing anything about this entire composition or the whole object and the way it renders. So let me undo that. All right, now I'm going to click away from all of my attributes here and try this again. None of my attributes are selected, and the way I did that was I simply clicked in this empty area down here in the appearance panel, and that deselected all of my attributes here. And with my object selected,
Which object? We've got lots of them there.
no, it's just the main one, just the button. With my object selected here, I'm going to click on the Add New Effect button, go down to Texture, and then Grain. And now it's showing me my whole button. I can zoom in.
Where did you do add new button? I can't see the screen.
Whoa.
Oh, that one? Oh, add new effect, you said buttons.
The add New Effect button, yes, that's correct. So I hit Grain, and you can zoom in here by hitting, I guess you can't zoom in this way here. But if I hold down the Command key and click on this a little bit, you'll see, boy, that preview is just so bad. You really don't get a whole lot of a preview. Let's change the intensity around here, 20 maybe, and we'll switch this over to sprinkles this time. And you'll see what we're starting to get here as a preview. I'll increase the intensity here to, let's say, 80. So I have an intensity, the contrast. So I have an intensity of 20, contrast of 80, and I've selected sprinkles as the grain type. Now, when I hit OK, I get this sort of, really funky effect going on here in the background and I can move this to a different position, and you'll see it has all sorts of different effects. If I move it above, the fill here, it applies that grain to the entire object, and it really just tweaks things around. So the beauty of this is that you can always edit it if you don't like the results that you get. So I'm not liking the results that I get, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to cheat and see how I made the one on my other document, because I thought that's what I used. I thought it was this grain effect. But you can see that you certainly can apply the effects right to a single object here. I'm going to switch over to the original web button and analyze what I did here. So I applied the drop shadow to the fill. There's a black layer that I created. I forgot that step, and the reason I did a black layer was so that I could, when you apply the grain, it gets it turns all those little pixels that we saw earlier to black instead of white is what we're getting on the other one. So let's try that. Let's see if we can recreate this. Gosh, I'm too technical for my own good here.
So undo.
So let's undo that a couple of times. until that grain is gone.
How come the pixels though were affecting the stroke?
Because it was applied to that entire object. I applied the fill to the whole object as opposed to that specific grain layer or fill layer that we're about to create.
But even though we clicked away from all of them, you can't just apply it to just the fill.
You can, and that's what we're going to do now.
But you have to do it in this way, like the special way.
Yeah, you have to do it in the appearance panel.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's try that. First thing I'm going to do is rearrange this stroke and move it to the top, so that we have my fills in a row. And it doesn't matter in the appearance panel for this whether the stroke is on top or not. But I'm going to click on this fill layer, the bottommost one that has our yellow gradient there, and I am going to, let's try this, duplicate the selected item. Okay? Then I'm going to fill this with black, and I can do that quickly by simply clicking on this drop-down menu here next to the color icon on that new fill layer that we just created. So I'm going to click on black and hit return, and that's strange because we should.
One went black.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know why.
but yours doesn't.
I didn't have it selected. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Okay. I'm going to create that new layer, change it to black, and the whole thing has gone black.
Okay.
All right, now notice with this fill layer selected, I'm going to apply that effect. I should have checked what effect it was. I'm certain it was this grain, texture grain effect. There we go. That's starting to look like something. Perfect. I'll leave it there. 20, 80 sprinkles. Just for fun. All right. So we're back to this now. So now this is not at all what we want, but we can change that by simply modifying the opacity of that top layer of this new film grain that we just did by clicking on the opacity link right here within our appearance panel for this, this particular attribute. And I'm going to change this to 5% opacity. And there, you see, we're starting to get a bit of that texture going on in there. I think I had 2% in the other one. So let's try 2%. There we go. Look how subtle that is. And you guys should be seeing something pretty subtle on your screen. Real subtle texture. And you can still change the density of those effects after the fact. If you don't like it, if you don't like sprinkles, if you want to do something different, right? Yeah. As soon as I'm done with this, we'll go break.
Okay.
But okay, thank you. But nevertheless, yeah, if I don't like that effect, I can click on grain again, and then change the attributes here. Well, of course, I need to have my object selected. Yes, click on grain, and I can change this. I can reduce the contrast, increase the intensity, change the type of effect that it is speckled. Doesn't do anything in this case. So yeah, so you can still continue to change it. And look at that nice texture we're getting on that button. You see that there?
Yeah.
That's basically what we're after. All right, why don't we go ahead and pause there and take a break. Kick off the I show you, so it's all recorded. And so we pretty much have our button finished here. It's we have our texture, we have our highlight, we have our highlighted edge. The only couple of things we need to do is maybe add a drop shadow, which we can do, and then go from there. So obviously adding a drop shadow is pretty straightforward. We've been doing quite a bit of that in the last week. All we need to do is select our object. Has to be selected. I've been forgetting. That's a part I've been forgetting a lot today, is selecting my object. It's easy to do. And by the way, I'm going to hit save real quick. Command S. Probably should have done it before the break, but I'm not as good. I got to tell you guys something. Just as I love to get on these stories. Some of the designers and programmers that I work with, they're like, why don't you just say Command S? I Command S all the time. I'm just every 5 minutes I'm Command S. Every couple of minutes, Command S, Command S. I'm always saving because I don't want to lose anything. it's a habit that I still have not gotten into after all these years. Cole?
It's so bad for me that sometimes I'll be reading an article on the internet and I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I wish I had that. You know, I wish I did because it can really save your butt. Who's lost artwork because they haven't saved? I mean,
5 hours.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And
it's
then I remembered after
and it's
that.
tough when you're on deadline too, and you're like, oh, it's due at 2 o'clock today. I just lost it. So, but I know where my bad habit stems from, and that is back in the old days, right? When we used to walk to school uphill both ways. No, but back in the old days of computer, when because I've been doing this for a little while. And I used to use a Macintosh 7100 AV, which was high tech. It had a 700 megabyte hard drive. Man, that was huge. Top of the line, cost me like $3,000. Anyway, that thing was so slow that when I was working doing trade show graphics at the time, right? That thing was so slow, and our trade show graphics are big. You guys remember even these computers, way light years ahead of what I had back then, can be pretty slow. Well, trade show graphics are huge, and it would take 2 hours to save a file. Because you're working at 400, 500 megabytes. So man, hitting Command S, you just locked yourself out. You had to take a lunch break. You were gone. Your computer was done. You couldn't work on your stuff all of a sudden. You could cancel it, but even canceling a save would take like 30 minutes because it's so slow. So anyway, I've lost artwork because of this bad habit. But anyway, for those of you that have the habit of saving often, it's a really good thing. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to be better from here on out until the end of the semester. So Command S, there we go. So let's go ahead and apply this drop shadow here. We'll click on this object, go up to Effect. This time we'll use the drop-down menu. Well, of course, we can do it here also. But I'm going to go up to the drop-down menu and click on Stylize, or select Stylize, and then click on the drop shadow option here. What's the first thing that we like to do when we preview? Yep. Let's see what we're doing. It's hard to run blind. So we'll click on Preview, and whoa! Why aren't we seeing anything? I have my object selected. I clicked on Preview. I have Multiply Black. 5 pixels. Maybe that's not enough. Click on OK here. What's going on?
I got my stroke too.
All right.
Did you get a stroke?
All right. Let me select my object and apply a drop. Whoa, that's weird. All right. Let me try that again. Select my object, stylize, drop shadow, click on preview. There we go. Whoa, I don't know what was happening before. I know I had my object selected. Okay, but we see that we don't want this much of a drop shadow, right? That looks pretty gaudy. We'd never do anything like that. So let's go ahead and change the X offset, because I want this drop shadow, I don't want it offset to one side. I want my drop shadow directly underneath my button, so it looks like the light is coming right from the top, not from the side, but right from the top. And so I'm going to change the X offset to 0. Okay? Does that make sense? Changing the X offset to 0? Because if there's some numbers in there, the X is this direction. I can also do negative, right? This is X, this is Y. So I need to reduce the amount of the Y offset too, and I'm going to change that to 3. And then I'm going to change the blur to something like, I don't know, what's a good number? 2 pixels? Something's going on here. Hang on, that just does not look right. I'm going to cancel out of this. There's already... Oh, I see. The drop shadow got applied. Oh, okay. That's weird. So, you guys, this is an anomaly. And whenever you start seeing funky stuff in your artwork, right? If you ever start seeing funky things like that, check your artwork in the appearance panel, right? Because I'm like, wait a minute, why was that drop shadow so big? Well, it was applying a drop shadow to a drop shadow. Okay? And look, this drop shadow here, the first one I did, was applied to that film grain layer that we did that only has a 2% opacity. So we can hardly see it. It's there, but it's 2%. So anyway, I applied it to the wrong layer. I want to apply it to the whole to the fill that is this gradient back here. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Now that I just did Command Z to undo, I'll go ahead and save again. Command S that puppy. All right. This time I want to apply this drop shadow to my main fill object. So I'm going to click on that fill, and then go back through the process of stylize, drop shadow, and then preview. Now that's what I should have been seeing the first time around, and that's probably what you guys are seeing on your end. So I'm going to change the offset to 0 here, and I'm probably going to do the Y offset to 5, and the blur down. Let's take it to 3 and see what we. That's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that drop shadow. So now we pretty much have our button done. The button itself is finished.
What'd you put the blur at? 3, I think. Yeah, it doesn't matter though.
Whatever you think looks good on your design. You could change the color of the drop shadow too if you'd like. And now we need to add the text. This is the final step, right? To adding the text. So I'm just going to switch over to what's the keyboard shortcut to switch over to the type tool? T. Yep. I'll press T, and then I'll just click and start typing the word download, right? I mean, that's what I had on the other one. Well, just as a rule of thumb, and I may have mentioned this before, by default, Illustrator, when you start typing an object for the first time in your document, the alignment on that line type is left, right? It's left aligned. It always does that. And that's okay, because most of the time you're aligning your text to the left, right? When you're typing a paragraph, you want the ragging on the right and a nice solid edge on the left, so it's aligned left. Well, when you're doing something like this, where you have an object that is going to be centered on a page, and obviously we want this text to be centered in the button, whenever I do that, I just automatically align my text to center. It's just a good practice to get into, because that way, if someone says, oh wait, I don't want it to say download, I want that to be the upload button, and you need to change the text, right? If this was left aligned, let's just, for fun, I'll go ahead and scale this up a little bit here, and I'll center it in my button. What's the fastest way to center? Select both of them, yes. And I want to align to a key object. So I'll make the button the key object. You guys remember how to do that? A little tricky, right? I select it again. So now both objects are selected, and you notice I get this fancy arrow when I roll over my objects. It kind of gets rid of the stem on the arrow. If I click on that background button, look what happens to the border. It thickens up. Turn thick. We haven't done this in a few weeks. And notice my align icon changed to a key. So this object is my key object, meaning any aligning that I do, this is going to stay in place and everything else is going to move. So now that I have my key object selected, I can do the horizontal align and then vertical align center. And now I know that that text is centered right in that button, smack dab in the middle.
I don't think I can't get both mine selected.
Oh, you have to hold the shift key down.
I know, but I did it.
Okay. So now here's what I was saying, or or just to demonstrate what I was saying about that left alignment thing, right? Now, if someone comes up and says, well, can you change that text to upload? Well, now my button is no longer centered. So I have to go through that process again of centering the text again. And then, if that button keeps changing, I'm going to keep having to do that. Well, I can prevent that unnecessary step in the future by simply aligning my text to the center. Right? I selected my text only this time. And you can see here my paragraph alignment buttons have appeared in my control panel. And I can click on Align Center. And now the text is aligned center. I should have done this the first time around. But now when I align this text to the button itself using that key object alignment, I'll do that now. Of course, now when I go to change this, it can be download, upload, and it's always going to stay in the center. That's just a little tip on a good work habit to get into when you're working on your own designs. Obviously, this single button, not that big of a deal if someone told you to change the text and you had to realign it. But it's good to get into some of these work habits because the projects aren't always going to be this simple, right? In some cases, you might have a lot of different text, a lot of different buttons, and things can change, and you want to work in an efficient way. How are they doing here?
Oh, it aligned it off the screen.
Oh, you forgot to do the key object.
No, well, I
Never-
can't get it to, I can't get it selected.
What? Okay, what's the process?
Well, you said to select this.
Okay.
Shift select this. Is it even selected?
Can I try it again?
Try what? Selecting that?
All right. Is it selected? Yes or no?
I don't think so.
Why not?
This is what box runs. I guess it is because there's one.
Okay. Now hit Command Shift D. Bring up your down.
Oh, that's because I did that.
Is that bringing it up?
I think Shift D.
There it is. Oh, because you have two objects selected, the bounding box is there, but it's on the outermost object. But yeah, it is selected because you see that line there.
And then you do.
Whoa, 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 whoa. No,
Okay,
you missed
go
a
under
step.
the myriad.
Yeah.
Now,
Because then there was that one like change.
notice the thick line? That is now the key object. So now your alignment will keep that button stationary. There you go. All right. I like this myriad text better than the Helvetica I used in my example. So, you guys, just to kind of quickly wrap this up, obviously you can look at my original design and you can tell exactly what I did to sort of create this little, what looks like an indent, right? It looks like this text here is sort of indented into the button, right? And we did that by doing a white drop shadow on it. Okay? It's called a white drop shadow, but really it's a highlight, but it's highlighting the bottom edge of our text. So to do that, I'll switch back over to my working document. Command S to save. Being inspired here from Colton. Command S all the time. Whoa, whoa, oh boy. Oh, whew, I thought I was about to lose my file there. It's taking too long to save. All right, there it is. It's still alive. All right, I have my text selected, and I'm going to go to Effect. And I'm not going to go all the way down here to Stylize and Drop Shadow. You notice Illustrator remembers the last effect that you applied, and there are two options. Okay, have we talked about these two options up at the top?
No.
No? The differences between those two?
No.
Anyone take a wild guess as to what the difference between apply drop shadow and then just the drop shadow option from the top is? Colton.
Drop shadow will bring up the options and then apply your last drop shadow.
That's exactly right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Everyone get that?
Yep.
All right. So I don't want to apply the same shadow that I did last time because last time it was a dark shadow on this button. So I just want to bring up the options for it. So I'm going to click on Drop Shadow, and there are the options. I'll click on Preview. And this time I'm going to switch my blending mode to normal, or the mode to normal, so that whatever color I pick, it's just going to be that solid color. I'll change the opacity to 100% so that it's going to end up being completely white. I still want the offset to be 0 because I want this text, or the highlight effect, to be directly under that text. I'll change the Y offset to 1 pixel because I do want that to change, and my blur to 0. All right. Doesn't look like much has happened yet, except for the fact that my text looks a little stretched and distorted because it's a black drop shadow on my text. But I'm going to change the color here to white, and I can do that by sliding this color picker controller into the top left-hand corner and then clicking OK. And you can see in my preview, there it is, that white drop shadow. You can really see it here, right? Doesn't that white drop shadow give it the effect like it's embossed or debossed into the button? Kind of cool. Yes, Brianna.
So what
Perfect,
if you press enter and then you're like, okay, I don't want that. So then, where would I go to adjust that?
To adjust
Because otherwise, if I go back up here, it wants to like.
It's going to apply another one. Exactly. That was the issue I was having earlier. So Brianna's question is, wait a minute, I've done this and I don't like it. I want to change the option. Well, all you need to do is, again, I have my appearance panel here open, right? You got to have the appearance panel open. Go ahead and click on your text, and you notice now all of the attributes that are being applied to that object are shown here. You can simply click on the drop shadow link to open that options panel back up and make any necessary changes. For instance, we may not want that 100% white. Maybe that's a little too harsh. I'll change this to 75% opacity. That's still not enough. I sometimes like the number 35 as a pretty special number for me. Oh, I didn't have preview. Let's see. 35 might be too subtle. We'll go to 50%, hit OK, and you notice we still have the same effect, but it's 50% opacity, so some of that button background and texture is coming through there. It's hard to tell, but you can see it, right? You can see it kind of coming through with that 50% opacity, and we're still yielding the same results. Cool? Has everyone got that? Kind of fun? All right. So we pretty much have our button complete. And now we can just add a background to this, and we'll be right back to where we pretty much started. So to add a background, I'm going to create a new layer. So open up your Layers panel. Click on the Create New Layer button. And our background obviously needs to be below our button, right? So I'm going to take this layer and move it underneath the static state layer that we created earlier. So I'm going to take this layer and just move it down underneath into where I see that solid white line that appears. That's letting me know that it's dropping this layer below the other layer. And indeed, when I let go, it does. I'll change the name to background. And now that I've got this layer highlighted, I can select, I can draw a background for this. And all I'm going to do is draw a rectangle, right? Because we're working with a rectangular shape. So I quickly switched over to my rectangle tool. Did anyone catch the keyboard shortcut? And you were on it, Cynthia. Yeah, just hitting the M key brings up your shape tool. And I'll draw that rectangle in the background, and it's probably going to fill black because black is showing on the screen. And here you can change this to any color you want. My original was brown. You can pick any color. Let's see, red and orange and green. Oh, that looks beautiful. That looks like some Windows 98 style stuff there. Anyway, pretty straightforward. We can add a gradient in that background and really start to have some fun with this. Okay. So, in the world of digital media, how many of you are familiar with tablet or smartphone devices? Anyone not familiar with like an iPhone or an Android or something like that? Colton, you still have the flip phone?
Yeah.
Walkie-talkie style?
I get text on that.
Oh man, I've seen some people that can text on those things like crazy. But anyway, so the reason I asked this, of course, is because there are, especially in the world of iPhone and iOS devices, right? Anything created by Apple, there's kind of some conventions that they follow, right? There's usually what's called the tab bar along the bottom, right? And then there's also the title bar that usually appears along the top that sort of frames the application, right? Whatever the app might be. Right now, this app is only designed to do one thing. It's just a button download. That's all it's designed to do. That's all right, though. Maybe we can throw it up for 99 cents. You can throw it up on the Apple Store for 99 cents and make some money off of this button download. What does it do? Well, it just downloads a button. Where? I don't know. All right, I'm going to lock this background layer, and so that when I go to move things around, it doesn't tweak my design. Okay. I'm going to select all of my static. Oh yeah, static state. We'll get into the hover state stuff. That's pretty straightforward. It's just about reversing the gradient, really. But I'm going to grab the whole static state button, everything on that layer. I can do it a couple of ways, right? Because I've locked my background layer, what keyboard command can I do to select everything? Command A, select all. Yep.
Could you meatball too?
You can meatball it as well, right? The meatball technique.
Oh, like
You can meatball it. That's another quick way with the mouse. What is another way? Of course, to use the selection tool, right? And that's what I did in this case. I just took my selection tool and I dragged a marquee across the area that I wanted to select, and that selected it too. So there's a few different ways. Obviously, you guys are well into all the different methods of that. But I've selected them. I'm going to move this down a bit just to give me a little room for a title bar. So I'm going to slide this down. It's somewhere around there. There's no exact position, but it's down a little way. And now I'm going to add a title bar to my app. See where we start going with this. The title bar is going to be very simple. I'm going to just draw a rectangle. Oh, I'm going to create a new layer first. Sorry, forgot to do that. I have my background layer. I clicked on it to select this layer. And the reason I did that is so when I go to create my new one, it's going to create it above the background but below my static state layer. So I'll click on the Create New Layer button, and there it is. And I'll change this to Title Bar. There we go. All right. Now I'll grab my rectangle tool and simply draw a rectangle across the top. Starting at the left-hand corner, I'll see my smart guides indicating that I'm on the anchor point, and I'll draw this to where it's, let's say, 60 pixels high. How do I know it's 60 pixels high?
It says H, you can look at that.
Yep, there it is. As you draw, when you have the smart guides option showing, illustrate, I think it actually, even without smart guides, it does it.
Really hard to get to 60.
And so I was able to nail 60, right? So I let go and I realized, oh, wait, 60 isn't what I wanted. But you can easily change that, right? I'll do that by clicking on the transform panel. And again, your monitors might be a little bigger, so you might not even have the transform panel link here like I do. Your transform options might already be showing across the control panel. So I'll click on that to bring up the transform option.
Where do you get it if it's not there?
It's already there. It's already in your control panel. It's already there.
Oh, the H.
Yeah. So you should see these same fields here in your control panel.
Oh, it's a H, not transform.
And what do you mean by an H? You guys getting something
Right
different?
here. Mine says H,
I don't have transform.
Like, yeah, sometimes it's there.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. Well, it's something. H stands for the height. I don't know
I wonder
why.
if you click like the, it does
Yeah,
the same thing.
Yeah,
for the,
all of those are clickable, but it's already there, right? So I wish I could show it on my screen, but basically what it is you guys' monitors are wider than mine, and because they are, Illustrator is already showing the X, Y, W, and H for you. It's already showing those. They're not showing on mine because my screen is not wide and Illustrator's curious enough to condense all of those 4 fields because they won't fit. So it's condensing them down into one thing that's called transform. Okay?
Okay.
So now I want to change the height of this button from 60 to 64. Okay? And if I stick to the default here, bless you, if I stick to the default, which is my center aligned reference point, you notice this little group of dots or squares over here? Notice the center one is the one that's selected. If I were to change the height of this from 60 to 64, look what happened to my button here, right? It changed in all directions. The width also changed. The height changed, and it all changed from the center. That's not what I wanted, because I wanted it all to happen from the top, and I didn't want the width to change at all. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that and go back into my transform panel. This time I'm going to change my reference point so that the change happens from the top. And because I'm not going to change the width, it doesn't matter which of these reference points I use, right? I can use the left, center, or right one because I'm not going to change the width. If you were changing the width, then it would matter which one you selected. But I'll just choose the one from the top left just to kind of keep that concept of working from the top left to the bottom right in mind. It's kind of the way we read and really spend most of our time on the computer thinking about things from top left to bottom right. The next thing I need to do is deselect this link button here, because that link button is what forced the width of my rectangle to change in addition to the height when I change it. So now if I deselect that link button, I can change the height by itself, and it indeed won't affect the width at all. Now my object is 64 pixels high. Okay?
It was fine till it did that.
Okay.
The link rest.
So, I deselected. I clicked away from my object and my square disappeared. Or my rectangle. Actually, no, it didn't. It was just the same color, right? So it's still there. So I can just click on it. I know it's there because I just finished changing the size and drawing it. I can go ahead and click on this and change the color slightly so I can see that it's different. And I'm going to darken it up here. I'm just, with the color, I double clicked on the color icon over here in my tools panel. And then it brought up the color picker. And I simply slid this indicator down slightly to make it darker. And you can see Illustrator shows you the original color that you had on that object. And then it previews, oh boy, gosh. Oh, I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, then it previews the color that you just selected in the picker, so you can compare the differences right here without actually having to view it on screen. So there we are. Now we've got a bit of a header bar going on. Well, unfortunately, that header bar doesn't look like much. It's kind of flat, right? Which is probably a good thing for design today for media. Flat is in. Kind of cool. But I'm going to add a gradient to that. I only changed the color to darker green so I could see it. I'm going to add a gradient by simply selecting the object again, clicking on the gradient panel, and this time I'm not going to simply click on this gradient selector here. I'm going to take this tiny, because I want it to be this dark green, that's why I picked a dark green. I'm going to take this tiny little fill icon that I have here, and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom on the right-hand side of my gradient down below. You see how it has a little bit of it has an arrow with a green plus there? That means it's going to add that green color right to my gradient here. And look, immediately, what would have been black, I just saved myself a step, right? What would have been black has now taken on that darker green that I wanted.
I don't have the little handles on mine.
You-
Oh, I have to click on it.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it changed it back,
Uh-huh.
the color.
Okay, so you got it?
I'm getting
Okay. So obviously I don't want the other end of the spectrum to be white. That would be a little too bright. So there's a couple of ways to do this. And I'll show you guys my technique. I mean, this is just the way when I'm doing a gradient that's a subtle transition from one color to the other, here's what I do. I take the darker color that I've already set, and then holding the Option key down, I click on it and slide it over. And the Option key is creating a duplicate for me. That's what that's doing. Okay? So now I can get rid of this white one, because I'm not going to want white in there. I can get rid of this white one by clicking on it and dragging it right off of the gradient slider there. And now you see I've ended up with, again, a green to green gradient. But this is cool because now I know I just want to change this one slightly. So I'm going to double click on the lighter one, on the one that I expect to be lighter. I've double clicked it on the slider. And now I can just adjust this slightly, really slight. You can see just a slight transition happening there. And I like that. That looks good. I'll change the angle to 90 degrees now. Should have done that before. And now, wait a minute though, 90 degrees, uh-oh. The darker's on the top, the lighter's on the bottom. I actually want it the other way, because remember our light's coming from the top. What's the quickest way to switch those? Anyone remember? Click on the flip button.
Those two squares on the bottom.
Yep. So you click. I'll click back on my object, and this little flip, or I guess it's the reverse gradient button. But yeah, that's what it does. I'll just click on that, and it'll swap those. Nice. So now we've got a bit more of a desired header effect going on there. Yeah, Robin.
I can't get that. Every time I click on this, it changes that back to the.
Every time you click on what?
Look, I changed it over here with the color.
Yeah.
And then I click on here to get the little things, and it changes it back. How do you get these? So you could drag it.
Just double click there and change the color to whatever you want. That's kind of a cool color combination. That's nice. Okay. So you can see now we've got this header bar that appears to have just a slight bit of a rounded effect because of that gradient. You guys are familiar with the gradients and stuff. But this is where the pixel, all of this is leading up to something, of course. I know you guys certainly know how to draw rectangles with gradients and all that stuff. But what I want to show you is a technique for creating lines that appear to be embossed into an object for interface design. So what does all that mean? Well, this is where that pixel preview stuff that we've been working on will come in handy. So I'm going to zoom into this quite a bit. And I'm doing this by holding the Command and Spacebar keys at the same time. And then drawing the marquee somewhere around the left-hand corner so I can really see up close. All right, so I've zoomed in, and I've zoomed in more than 600%, which is what I want, right? Because I want, when I switch over to Pixel Preview, I want that pixel grid to show up. So I'll hit Command Option Y to bring up Pixel. There they are. Perfect. Okay. So now I'll show you a neat trick You can take this one to the bank too. You walk into some user interface design interview, and if they have you do some Illustrator work or Photoshop work, it'll kind of work the same way in Photoshop too. And you throw this at them, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, this guy's hired. This gal's got the job." But anyway, so we'll start this by zooming in. Of course, now we have our pixel grid, and I've selected the pen tool. I'm just going to draw a straight line, okay? And I'm going to draw that line from the top to the bottom of this rectangle that we just drew. So I'll do one click with the pen tool, and then I'll hold the shift key down, and then click near the bottom of this shape now, okay? So I have a line selected here. Now, unfortunately, my line does not have a stroke on it. It has a gradient, and I don't want that gradient. So I am actually going to switch so that my stroke has some sort of stroke to it, or my line has some sort of stroke to it. And I'm going to do that by simply, it's important that you have your line selected. I'm going to apply a none fill so that I don't have any fill on there. And then I'm going to switch over to the stroke, and I'm going to apply a color to my stroke. And in this case, I'll just choose black. Okay. Now, the reason I'm in pixel preview mode here, I'm going to zoom in a little more, is notice what's going on here. You see how there's this sort of extra halo of a line going on here? Why do you think that is?
It's not aligned properly?
It's not aligned to that pixel grid. Exactly. So I'm going to click on that line and try to scoot it over one way or the other with my arrow keys. And now, look what's happening though.
How big of a stroke did you give it?
What's that?
Did you give it a stroke?
By default, I think it applied a 1-point stroke. But the answer to your question is no, I have not applied I didn't change the stroke weight at all. Just whatever the default was. So look what's happening though. You remember when we zoom in past 600% and we use the arrow keys to move an object around, what happens to that object? It aligns to the pixel grid, right? Well, this is a stroke, and a stroke is just a single line. And so it's aligning to the pixel grid, but look what's happening in pixel preview mode. Because it's right on the grid and it's 1 point wide right here, half of it is trying to render over to this pixel and half of it is trying to render over to this pixel, and it looks like a real muddy 2 pixel wide line. And that's not what we want, right? We want that to look crisp and sharp and be totally aligned. So we can get there by simply converting this or changing this line, which we know is 1 pixel wide. And now, yes, Robin, feel free to type it, and all of you guys, type in, select your line and type in 1 pixel wide. Okay?
And then when I select it, it's going to the outside, where yours looks like it's going to the inside of the black.
Okay, just make sure you have a line stroke center here. Actually these options are dimmed out, so it should be, make sure your cap is blunt here,
Yeah.
so that, but the main thing is make sure it's 1 pixel wide, okay,
Okay.
at this stage. Now I'm going to show you guys something that we haven't really worked with. There's a couple of ways to do this, of course. But I want to show you how you can quickly convert a stroke that has a specific thickness to it to a shape that's exactly the same width. And you can do that by going to Object, right? And if you scroll halfway down, you'll see there's this Path option, and then there's this Outline Stroke option. So what it does, it's going to outline whatever width that stroke is, it's going to create a shape out of it. Now we could also use, flatten transparency and then some other options as well. There's other ways of getting there. But I just wanted to introduce this new or different technique for doing that. And this is specifically what this feature is designed for. So we go to path, because this is a path that we're working with, and then we go to outline stroke. So go ahead and select outline stroke. And look what happens to that object. It's now become a very skinny, tall rectangle that is exactly 1 pixel high. So now when I move it left and right with my arrow key, you'll see it snaps right to that pixel grid the way we want it to. Okay? So that's one way. That's one way that you can still work within the confines of this whole pixel grid concept, and still design your artwork very quickly using the pen tool and paths, and then afterwards you can outline those strokes and get fine-tuned in here and start snapping stuff to the grid. All right. So with that, I think we're out of time, and I know it's been fun. You guys are all so. Oh, I'm pumped. I feel the energy. I feel it. So we'll continue this next time, because you'll definitely want to be here on Tuesday, because this trick right here is the moneymaker.
This one is? Or
Yeah, no, what we're doing right now. You'll see. You'll see. It's going to blow your mind. Maybe not blow your mind, because you guys are so like savvy with stuff, but it'll make you, if you show this off to someone, they'll be like, oh, that's how they do it. So cool. All right, so let's go ahead and save this, and we'll wrap it up for the night. And